So links are interesting or odd enough and important enough that I wanted to make a separate video dedicated just to adding links to your page and styling them. As you already saw through page properties, there was a link category, and that made it kind of simple to quickly change the colors of your link and decide whether or not it was going to be underlined. But let's talk about how to do this directly in the code view. So links are unique because they have 4 different states. A link is called a pseudo class, by the way, and later on we'll get into what classes are. But it basically means it's not just always the same, like a heading is always the same, a paragraph is always the same. A link is active, it can do 4 different things. So when we think about styling a link, we have to think about 4 different states. The way the link looks when you just see it on the page and you're not interacting with it, the way the link looks as your mouse hovers over it, as I am, the way it looks as you click it, and the way it looks after you've already visited that page. So you must style all 4 of these different states, and that's when we were in Dreamweaver, and I'll just jump over to Dreamweaver here for a second, and when you are in page properties, go to here, in page properties, and in the links category here, these are the 4 different states that I'm talking about, and you need to style all of them because the most important probably is the visited link, because if you don't style it, what's going to happen is the browser is going to give it its default style. So that's kind of been like the slogan for everything so far. The browser gives it default style, so what we're doing is we're overriding those default styles. But let's say you have your website set up with a really dark color and a very light color link, so that's okay, you have some contrast. But if you don't style this visited link, it's going to give it a default color of dark blue, and no one's actually going to be able to see your link. So you need to write rules or style all 4 of these states. Just jump back over here. So, and when I say style the 4 states of the link, well, what does that mean? What exactly, how can you style them? What are the things you can do? Well, you can decide what the font family will be. Traditionally, you just set the font for the very first state, which is the state that our link is in when it hits the page, and we just see it. And then if you don't set a different font family for the 3 other states, they're all going to just take on whatever font family you set for that. The same is true with the font size and font weight. So normally these things, the family, the font size, and the weight, are only going to be assigned to the first state because the other states after it, the style cascades down, so they'll all take on those attributes. Text decoration, that's something that you're definitely going to want to style, and that is if the text is going to be underlined or not underlined, or you could have a strike through it, or there are a couple of other options. Possibly you would want to use a background color for one of the states of your links, and padding. So this is the new sort of element that I'm going to start talking about. In the last couple of videos we talked about margins and how browsers give default spaces through margins, and the same thing happens with padding. But first, let's look at an example of using text decoration. So this is taken directly from Dreamweaver. I'm setting up the HTML here, making a rule with CSS targeting the HTML link, and that is what we call, that's the tag for the first state of my link. And so I'm targeting that. I've put some padding on here, which I'll talk about in a minute. And you write out text-decoration, and these are all the different options. So the blink is, when I put my mouse on it, it's going to have a line under it. So typically the ones that you're going to look at are either none, so no line, or an overline, which is pretty weird, or an underline. So I would say none or underline are the standards. Now let's jump over to padding here. So padding is the space between elements and the edge of the box it's in. So we talked about margin, that default space between boxes, right? So the way CSS treats all HTML is if it's in its own little box. So this is default space in between, but actually each one of these boxes has default space, which is almost nothing. I guess it's like only 1 pixel between the edge of where the text starts and the edge of its box here. So I have my background set to white so you can see what the padding is. Now here we're going to look at an example where I've increased the padding on the left and the right of each one of these links. And so the result is it takes up more width on the page. If I have a background color, I can really see that. If I don't have a background color, these guys are just going to be more separated out. So at this point I want to jump over to the W3 school here for a second. And if I can just open it up and go to the W3 school. And this is what we're talking about is called the CSS box model. And the idea is that everything is in a box. So here's our content, and then we have our padding. So the padding represents the space between the content and the edge of the box, where we could possibly have a border. We haven't talked about borders yet. And then the margins on the outside. So the margin is the space between this whole box and the next box. The padding is the space between the content and the edge of the box. I know it seems a little bit strange, but the best way to understand it is really just to start jumping in and using it in Dreamweaver. So let me jump back here. Just 1 second. Okay. And this is how we can write it. Padding, we can specify each one of the sides. If I just write padding 20, it's going to add padding of 20 pixels to the top, bottom, left, and right. Or I can go and specify each one of the sides individually. When you are writing the styles or the CSS rules for your links, the order is important. The hover state has to come after the first one. This is our initial state, a link. A visited is next. That's once they've already seen the page. And a hover is the third one. A active, that's the moment when you click on the link, is going to be the last one. So here's kind of a typical, perhaps, way that you might write your rules. For my initial state, I've put the color. I've put text decoration at none, so it will not have an underline. I put a padding of left and right 20 pixels. So all of these other states are going to take on any of the attributes I've set up here unless it overrides it. So this one, in my visited state, I've changed the color to gray. So I'm overriding this one. But I haven't put in anything different for text decoration or padding, so it's going to keep those same attributes. Basically, instead of me having to write out text decoration and the padding left and right, it's just already going to be there. So for the hover state, I've overridden the original color. Oh no, sorry, I've actually put the color back to the same in this example. But now I've added a background color. And then in the active state, I've overridden the original color to make it red, and I've put in a background color as well. Okay. So I will jump over to Dreamweaver and just demonstrate this, but just to continue, you can add padding to any HTML element, so into any one of your CSS rules targeting HTML. So this is my whole CSS rule, this is the HTML I'm targeting. In this example, I'm working with the H1 tag, and I've added padding of left. So this is the box that I was using in my other example about inputting color values. And you can see, so this one has a background color that was kind of a cyan. And now I've added a padding of left to my H1. So what that did was it moved the content, which is the text, over 20 pixels. So this can also be a very nice design element. What I want you to think about is always how much space is between the content and its edge. So normally, and most of the time, if you're going to use a background color on an element, such as an H1, so it makes it look like it's in a box, you want to also have some padding around in that box, so that way the element, such as the text, doesn't go right up to the edge. Okay, so now I'm going to jump over to Dreamweaver here just for a second. And I'll try to go through this kind of quickly. Let's go back over to the split view, and I already have some set up, but I'm going to delete this and say, so what if I want to style my tags now? Style my, sorry, not my tags, my links. So here they are in their default settings. Everything is default. Default font, default color, default underline. And so what are the first things that I can do? I'm going to, it doesn't totally matter where I put these, but I think it's a good idea to keep things in order. So if my H1 is at the top of my page, then my H3 is at the top, and then my links are next. So that's where I'm going to start putting in the rules for my links. So the first one is a:'link, and that's just targeting the regular state. And this is the one I'm going to put in my font family. And I'll just choose the same that I had from the rest of the fonts on my page. And I can choose a color, and I can use any one of those input values I talked about before. So I'm going to say black, and then I can choose a font size, and I'll say 14px, and I'm going to put in padding, left, and I'll put in 20px. Let's just click over here so you can kind of see how the changes are happening. I'm getting now space in between, and my font's actually a little bit smaller. And I'm just going to copy this and bring it down here and do this, but change it to right. And then copy this again, bring it down here, and I'll change this to top. And I'll put in less. I'll put in maybe 10 pixels to the top. And this won't actually be noticeable, really that noticeable, until I put in a background color. Right now it just looks like space going around it. I don't want to have the underline, so that's going to be the text decoration. I'm going to go start typing in text, and here you can see a text decoration, and I will choose none. And the semicolon, and close it out with the closing curly bracket. And now I'll switch it to live view, so we can actually see the way it would look in the website. And here we go. Okay, so nothing is happening when I roll over it because I haven't written a rule for that state yet. But I basically just changed the font and added some more space. So now the next one that I'm going to write is going to be for the active state. Oh, sorry, not for the active state. I'm going to go over to the visited state. I need to write visited next. So I'm going to do visited. And, oops, that's not correct. Visited. So do I want it to look at all different when it's gone into the visited state? I just want to make sure that in visited it has the same color, and I'm just going to put that in as color black, and everything else will just cascade down. I don't need to input the font family or anything like that. I just want to make sure that the browser doesn't put in its default color. It's not going to put in a default font or default pattern or default size, but it will put in a default color. So that's why I'm adding that and not just simply relying on it cascading down. And next I will put in the hover state. And so this is the one that really the difference is I just want to add a background color. Oops. Yep, no, that was correct. Background color. And I'm going to, I'll just put in white. We could do something a lot nicer, but just for the sake of time, I'm trying to just rush through. I could put in something like an RGBA value so I can have some transparency. And for my A active state, that's the moment when I click down. Maybe I'll just have my color of my text change briefly to become red. And this is really all just for the sake of example. So now let's go and check to see that this is working. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to preview it in a browser window. And so now when I put my mouse over, I get a different color in the background. Let's go check one of my other pages and then come back, and I can see that my colors haven't changed. I haven't taken the default colors. Well, it doesn't exactly look black, does it? That could just be my monitor. Okay, so that's pretty much all that you need to do. I really would like you to be able to practice using the different color input values and just setting the rules for each one of your let's just test the, oh yes, when I click on it, it does become red. That was what I just wanted to test. So that's the active state. If you see just that moment, it becomes red. That's really fast. So just practice writing out all of these different, the 4 states for the links and using the different attributes we've talked about for adding color.